The human ambassador was already smiling when she walked out of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed off the high ceiling. The Krell delegate was still laughing behind her. The Voxian chief liaison, Valen Kor, watched her go and felt nothing but satisfaction. He turned to his aide. "They're learning," he said, finally. 3 days before the withdrawal, Kor sat in the main council chamber and watched a vote he believed would secure his species' dominance for another century. The Krell delegation had proposed new trade rules targeting human expansion into the outer Veil systems. The tariffs were brutal. The numbers would bankrupt thousands of human colonies within a single year. Kor's own premier had given quiet approval. The Voxians would support the measure. The Krell ambassador stood at the speaking platform as the votes came in. He laughed when the total passed the threshold. Actually laughed. The sound carried across the chamber like breaking glass. The human ambassador, a tall woman named Helen Carter, did not move. She had been sitting very still through the entire session. Her hands rested on the table in front of her. Her expression had not changed once. Kor had noticed that during the debate. He had assumed it was resignation. When the final tally lit up on the overhead screen, 47 in favor, 12 opposed, 3 abstentions, she stood up. She gathered her papers. She walked toward the exit. Her footsteps were quiet, deliberate. She passed Kor's seat. Her eyes met his for less than a second, then she was gone. The small smile stayed with him. He did not know why. That evening, Kor drank fermented nectar in his chambers and composed a message to his premier. The subject line read, "Human submission achieved as projected." He quoted the trade numbers. He noted the absence of protest. He predicted that within 6 months, human diplomats would return to the negotiating table with significantly reduced demands. His aide brought him another glass. Kor asked what the human embassy was doing. "Quiet, sir," the aide said. "The lights are on, no unusual activity." "Good, they're licking their wounds." "Yes, sir." Kor raised his glass. "To the older species, to order, to our rightful place." He drank. The nectar was sour and warm. He did not taste anything wrong. The next morning, the Krell ambassador went on council broadcast. He called humans an emotional and primitive species. He said their governments were ruled by feelings instead of logic. He said they did not deserve their seats at the diplomatic tables. He spoke for 20 minutes. He never raised his voice. His smile never faded. The SciFi delegation followed by refusing to share medical research with Earth. A serious illness was spreading through 3 human colonies. The SciFi Grand Researcher told the council that her people's biological discoveries were not charity. She said older species had earned their knowledge. Younger species would have to earn access. Kor's premier sent new orders. Human refugee ships approaching neutral ports should be redirected. Not turned away completely, just inconvenienced. A few extra days in space. A few more families separated. Enough to remind the humans who held the power. Kor signed the papers without reading them fully. He approved policies designed to make humans suffer just enough to bring them back to the table on their knees. He did this because his premier asked. He did this because his career depended on obedience. He did this because he believed, truly believed, that humans were a useful but minor species, and that their discomfort was a necessary tool of statecraft. The human ambassador sent a formal complaint that afternoon. Kor filed it in the 47th archive. He did not read past the first paragraph. The day before the withdrawal, Kor attended a dinner for senior council diplomats. Helen Carter was there. She stood near the windows overlooking the station's docking bay. She was not speaking to anyone. She held a glass of water. She did not drink from it. Kor approached her, not because he wanted conversation, because he wanted to see her face up close. He wanted to watch her perform submission. "Ambassador," he said, "Chief Liaison Kor," her voice was steady. "I trust your people are adapting to the new trade environment." She looked at him, her eyes were very calm. "We always adapt. I'm sure you do. The council values cooperation. The council values extraction." Kor blinked. He had not expected directness. "That's a harsh characterization." Helen Carter set down her water glass. She straightened her sleeve. One button was loose. She did not fix it. "Chief Liaison," she said, "how long have you worked with humans?" 20 years. And in 20 years, have we ever broken a treaty? No. Have we ever voted against council security measures? No. Have we ever demanded special privileges? No. Core felt something uncomfortable building in his chest. You're listing your compliance ambassador. I'm aware of it. Am I? She tilted her head. I'm listing our reliability. There's a difference. She walked away. Her footsteps were quiet. Core watched her go. He told himself she was rattled. He told himself she was grasping for dignity in a losing position. He told himself he had won. He did not look at the docking bay below the windows. If he had, he would have seen that the human freighters were already being refueled. Not the normal rotation, all of them at once. The withdrawal happened at 06:14 station time. Core was in his chambers reviewing agricultural import projections. The lights flickered once. He looked up. The lights steadied. He returned to his tablet. 17 minutes later, his aide knocked. The man's face was pale. "Sir, you need to see this." Core took the tablet. A single message glowed on the screen, 23 words. Earth has withdrawn from all diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council, effective immediately. All human ambassadors are being recalled. All embassies are closing. Do not contact us. He read it once and laughed. He read it twice and frowned. The third time, his hands began to shake. He called the human embassy. The line was disconnected. He called the human consulate on Centaurus Prime. The building was empty. He sent emergency messages to every human contact he had built over 20 years. None of them answered. Not one. "I'm going there," he said. "I need to see it." The Silent Row was called that because the older species had once joked that humans were too quiet to be trusted. Now the name felt different. The embassy building stood in morning light. The human flag was gone from the front entrance. The doors were locked. Through the windows, Core could see empty desks, clean floors, removed pictures. The walls still showed darker rectangles where framed items had hung for decades. They had erased themselves from the building, as if they had never been there at all. A small note was attached to the front door. Core bent to read it. The note said the building had been sold to a Turin property company that morning. The sale had been completed in 15 minutes. Core stood up slowly. His thumb tapped against his thigh, the old habit. He had not noticed himself doing it for years. "They were preparing for this," he said to his aide. "Sir, they didn't just wake up this morning and decide to leave. The sale took 15 minutes. That means the paperwork was ready. The price was agreed. The buyer was waiting." His aide said nothing. Core walked back to his chambers through corridors that felt colder than before. The climate controls were already beginning to break down. No one had noticed when humans were the ones maintaining them. The reports started arriving within the hour. Every human freighter in Council space had changed course at exactly the same moment. Not gradually, simultaneously. They were heading home. The shipping conglomerate on Vex Station, owned by a human family for 3 generations, had closed its doors at dawn. The medical clinic on Sundaris that treated the children of 40 species had posted a notice on its door, permanently closed. "Thank you for your trust. Human doctors, human engineers, human teachers, human technicians." They were packing up their lives and leaving. Core called the council speaker and demanded an emergency session. The speaker's voice was thin. "The same thing is happening on my world," he said. "My daughter. She was studying at a human university on Earth. They escorted her to a transport ship this morning. She's on her way home. How many others? Every human-run school across the galaxy. Thousands of students, all sent back." The speaker's voice broke. He said his daughter had loved that school. She was crying when she called him. Core sat at his desk. The lights flickered again. He did not look up. The Krell military lost contact with 18 warships that afternoon. Not attacked. The ships had simply stopped working. Their reactors powered down on their own. The crews were safe but stranded in deep space, drifting between stars, waiting for rescue. Core's aide brought the report. The Krell used human-built navigation computers in those ships, bought them cheaply 20 years ago. Human technology was always reliable and inexpensive. Were there other failures? The aide nodded slowly. Every Krell warship that stopped working contained human-designed components. Every Sithari research station that went dark relied on human specialists. Every Voxian factory that halted production used human-manufactured parts. Core stared at him. Pattern. The humans built everything, sir. We just didn't notice because they never demanded credit. They smiled. They worked hard. They charged fair prices. They never threatened us. They never reminded us how much we needed them. And now, the aide's voice dropped to a whisper, now they're gone. Core spent that night in the 47th archive. He pulled up every diplomatic message from Earth in the last 15 years. There were thousands. He had filed most of them as routine complaints, the kind of emotional outbursts he had come to expect from humans who did not understand how the older species operated. He opened the first message, 12 years old. Formal complaint regarding council policies that systematically prevent younger species from advancing. The current framework is designed to preserve power in the hands of founding members. We request a working group to examine structural reforms. Core had never read past the first paragraph. He had marked it low priority. He had moved on. The second message, 10 years old. Humans are developing independent supply chains. This is not our preference, but we no longer trust the Council to treat us fairly. We will continue to participate in Council trade while building parallel infrastructure. Core remembered laughing at this one. He had shown it to colleagues. They had joked about how dramatic humans were. The third message, 8 years old. Attached is a list of 17 specific incidents in which Council members treated human delegates with documented disrespect. We request formal acknowledgement and corrective action. He had filed it without reading the list. The fourth message, 6 years old. Humans are beginning to question whether membership in this council is worth the constant insults and unfair treatment. We request a good faith negotiation regarding our concerns. The fifth message, 4 years old. If certain patterns continue, humans will be forced to consider our options. This is not a threat. This is a statement of observed reality. The sixth message, 2 years old. Humans are prepared to walk away. The infrastructure is in place. The decision has not yet been made, but the window is closing. The seventh message, 6 months old. The decision has been made. We are waiting only for the right moment. Core stopped reading. His hands were shaking too badly to hold the tablet. He set it down on the archive desk. The screen glowed up at the ceiling. The 47th archive was cold. The heating had been failing for weeks. He counted the messages he had just read. 7. He had found 7 in the first 10 minutes of searching. He searched for another hour. 47 warnings, over 12 years, each one logged, filed, and ignored. He picked up the tablet again. He typed a query into the Council's central records. How many formal warnings had the Council received from human diplomats across all species and all departments? The number came back after 30 seconds. 4,112. Each one logged, each one filed, each one ignored. Core sat alone in the cold archive. The lights above him were the old kind, human installed, still working for now. He could hear the faint hum of their power supply. He wondered how long that hum would last. The emergency council session began at the 7th hour the next morning. Core had never seen the chamber so full. Every delegate from every species was present. The seats reserved for human representatives sat empty in the front row. 3 empty chairs, 3 vacant desks, 3 nameplates that would never be used again. The speaker tried to bring the meeting to order. No one was listening. Delegates were shouting at each other. The Krell ambassador was demanding military action. The Turin delegate was weeping openly. The Sithari grand researcher stood alone near the windows, her back to the room, her shoulders shaking. Finally, the speaker pounded his ceremonial staff against the platform. Once, twice, 3 times. The chamber went silent. He began by listing what they knew. Every human had left council space within 48 hours. Every human-owned business had closed or been transferred to other ownership. Every human-built system that required ongoing technical support was failing. The Council's own translation network, maintained by a human company for 30 years, was breaking down. 3 minor languages had already become untranslatable. The Krell ambassador stood up before the speaker had finished. "Send warships to Earth immediately," he said. "This is economic warfare. We must teach them a lesson." Kor watched him speak. He felt something he had never felt before: embarrassment, deep, burning embarrassment. The Krell ambassador was demanding war against a species that had not fired a single shot. They had simply gone home. The speaker asked if the Krell ambassador had reviewed the military assessments. "I have not." The speaker pulled up the report on the main screen. 68% of the combined fleet used human-designed targeting systems. Those systems had stopped receiving updates. They would slowly become inaccurate over the coming weeks. 43% of all warships used human-manufactured power couplings. Replacement parts no longer existed because the factories had closed. Every single advanced medical ship had human-trained doctors who were now on transport ships heading home. The Krell ambassador sat down without saying another word. The SciFi Grand researcher stood up next. Her voice was thin and broken. She spoke about the cancer treatments she had been receiving for 3 years, manufactured on a human world. She had a 6-month supply remaining. After that, she would die. She was not the only one. Hundreds of thousands of citizens across the council depended on human medicines. Without resupply, many of them would not survive the year. The chamber fell into terrible silence. Kor rose from his seat. He walked slowly to the speaking platform. His legs felt heavy. He had spent his entire career arguing that humans were a useful but minor species. Now he had to stand before the council and admit how wrong he had been. He began by reading the 7 warnings he had found in his personal files. He read them slowly. Each word echoed in the quiet chamber. He watched the faces of the delegates change as they listened. Recognition, shame, fear. When he finished, he told them he had found 47 similar warnings in his own records. He had ignored every one of them. "How many warnings did the council itself receive?" he asked the speaker. The speaker looked at his aide. The aide checked the records. 4,112, the aide said. "Over 15 years, each one logged, filed, and ignored." A delegate from the Brinari Federation stood up. She admitted that her government had received 43 direct warnings from the human ambassador to her world. She had read each one personally. She had dismissed each one as an emotional overreaction. She broke down crying as she spoke. One by one, delegates rose to confess. The Krell admitted to 160 warnings. The SciFi admitted to 200. The smaller species admitted to dozens each. By the time everyone had spoken, the speaker's aide had confirmed the number. Over 4,000 warnings. 4,000 chances to change course. 4,000 opportunities to treat humans as equals instead of servants. They had wasted every single one. The speaker called a recess. Kor went to the drowned garden. The observation deck overlooked the station's outer hull. Below him, the docking bays stretched out in long rows. Most of them were empty. The bays that had always been reserved for human ships were dark. No lights, no movement, no crew. A small voice spoke beside him, "Chief Liaison." He turned. The Turin delegate, a young woman named Fessa, stood nearby. Her gold eyes reflected the station lights. She was smaller than most of the other delegates. Her people had been dismissed as minor for 200 years. "Delegate Fessa," he said, "do you know why they really left?" Kor hesitated. The trade vote, the insults, the unfair treatment. She shook her head slowly. The trade vote was just the final straw. They had been ready to leave for a long time. The thing that finally pushed them over the edge was not anger. What was it? Sorrow. Kor waited. Fessa explained that humans had spent 40 years in the council hoping to change it from within. They had hoped older species would eventually learn to treat younger ones as equals. They had hoped the system would grow more just over time. But they had watched year after year as the same patterns repeated. The same insults. The same unfair votes. The same dismissive attitudes. The same casual cruelty. They had finally realized that the system would never change, because the older species did not want it to change. "So they stopped trying to change us," Fessa said. "Instead, They spent the last 15 years quietly building a future without us. Independent supply chains, their own diplomatic networks with younger species we had ignored, technology we do not understand and cannot replicate. Who told you this? A human friend, last year. She explained it to me over tea. Kor stared at her. And you didn't tell anyone. Fessa's gold eyes held his. Would you have listened? He opened his mouth to answer. Nothing came out. She walked away. Her footsteps on the deck were very quiet. The council session resumed after 2 hours. The chaos had returned. The Krell ambassador was demanding new measures. Several delegates proposed seizing human assets within council space to keep their systems running. The Sithari Grand Researcher was arguing with the Brinari delegate about medical databases. Kor stood up again. This time his voice was steadier. Your proposals are not just wrong, he said. They are impossible. There are no human assets to seize. The factories were sold to Turin companies last year. The shipping lanes were transferred to Brinari corporations. The medical research was purchased by smaller species at low prices over the last 2 years. The chamber went quiet. The humans spent years carefully untangling themselves from our economy, Kor continued. They left nothing behind for us to take. They did not just leave. They made sure we could not punish them for leaving. The Krell ambassador asked what he proposed instead. Kor took a breath. I propose that we send an envoy to Earth, not to demand, not to threaten, to apologize, to beg if necessary, to find out what we need to do to repair what we have broken. The chamber exploded in protest. Older species accused him of betraying his own people. The Krell ambassador called him a coward. His own premier sent a private message telling him to stand down immediately. Kor refused. Pride led us to this disaster, he said. More pride will only make it worse. We have 2 choices. Continue to pretend we are strong and watch our civilization slowly collapse over the next year, or admit our mistakes and try to rebuild what we destroyed. The speaker called for a vote. 27 species voted in favor of sending an envoy. 26 voted against. The motion passed by a single vote. Kor was named the lead envoy. That night he went back to his chambers to pack. The apartment was dark. The water was off. The food preservation unit had gone warm. Everything inside had spoiled. He packed by the light of an emergency lamp. His leather notebook went into his bag first, then his spare tablet, then the 47 warning messages he had printed from the archive. He sat on the edge of his bed and tried to think of what he would say when he reached Earth. Every speech he drafted in his head sounded hollow. Every apology felt insufficient. How do you apologize to a civilization for 40 years of casual cruelty? He did not know, but he had to try. He wrote a single line in his notebook before turning off the lamp. We were wrong about everything, and I was the worst of them. The transport ship that would carry them to Earth was a hastily assembled vessel made of components from 12 different species. Half of it had once contained human-built parts that had now been removed and replaced with inferior alternatives. The ship rattled when it moved. The communications were unreliable. The navigation system was barely functional. 12 envoys boarded at dawn. Kor, the Krell ambassador who had demanded military action but now sat in silence. The Sithari Grand Researcher who had stopped speaking entirely. Fessa, the Brinari historian. 7 others from species large and small. They carried no weapons. They carried no demands. They carried only a desperate hope that the humans would still talk to them. The journey to Earth would take 11 days. Kor sat in his small cabin as the ship pulled away from the station. Through the viewport, he watched the conquered spire shrink behind him. The lights were still flickering. The docking bays were still dark. He opened his notebook and began to write. 11 days. He filled 3 notebooks during the journey. He wrote about his career. He wrote about every human delegate he had dismissed. He wrote about Helen Carter's small smile. He wrote about Fessa standing beside him in the drowned garden. He wrote about the 4,000 warnings. The Krell envoy found him on the 4th night. Kor was in the ship's small observation deck, watching the stars streak past. The Krell ambassador sat down across from him. He looked older than he had a week ago. His broad shoulders were slumped. My son warned me, the Krell said quietly. Kor waited. 3 years ago, he wrote a report. It warned that the Empire was becoming dangerously dependent on human technology. He recommended a careful, gradual reduction in that dependence. What happened? The leadership read the report and laughed at it. They filed it away. My son was demoted and sent to a backwater system as punishment for being alarmist. The Krell's voice dropped. He warned me personally, told me to take the human concerns seriously, to push for reform, to listen. Kor watched the man's hands. They were shaking. What did you tell him? I told him he did not understand politics. I told him humans were emotional and would always remain dependent on council infrastructure. I told him to stop making trouble. The Krell looked up. His eyes were wet. He stopped making trouble, and now he's right and I'm wrong and my civilization is crumbling around me. Kor sat in silence for a long moment. Then he said, maybe you should call him. The Krell nodded slowly. He stood up. He walked to the other side of the observation deck and pulled out his communicator. Kor heard his voice trembling as he spoke. He did not listen to the words. They were not for him to hear. The ship entered human space on the 7th day. The border was marked by simple buoys broadcasting a polite message in every council language. The message said that they had entered sovereign human space without an invitation. It said they should turn back. They did not turn back. They continued forward slowly, all weapons powered down, a continuous broadcast announcing their peaceful intent. They were not stopped. They were not contacted. They were simply ignored. For 6 days, they drifted through human space. Kor stood at the viewport for hours each day. He saw thriving worlds, busy shipyards, orbital structures he had no name for. One of them was the size of a moon. It rotated slowly against the starfield, covered in lights that moved in patterns he could not follow. The humans had been busy in their absence. They had been building things, new things, things the council had no vocabulary for. On the 10th day, the ship's captain called Kor to the bridge. We're being shadowed, the captain said. 3 vessels, design unknown. They've been matching our course for 6 hours. Kor looked at the sensor readout. The vessels were sleek, silent. They moved in perfect formation. No weapons were visible, no hails came through. Are they threatening us? I don't know, the captain said. I can't tell. I've never seen anything like them. Kor watched the 3 vessels pace his ship through the viewport. They stayed exactly the same distance away, neither closing nor falling back. He made a note in his journal. They are not afraid of us. They are not even curious. They are simply watching. On the 11th day, they reached Earth. The planet glowed before them, blue and white, turning slowly against the black. Kor stood on the bridge and stared at it through the viewing window. He had seen Earth in pictures and reports 1,000 times. Seeing it with his own eyes felt different. It looked alive in a way that no other world he had visited ever had. It looked like a place where things grew and changed and refused to stop moving. Around the planet, the orbital structures were enormous. Rings of light circled the equator. Vessels came and went in patterns he did not understand. A fleet of ships of a design he had never seen before moved in slow formation near the outer marker. The humans had built all of this in plain sight. The council had never noticed. They had been too busy looking down to look up. The ship hailed Earth control. No answer for 2 hours. Kor waited on the bridge. The other envoys gathered around him. The Krell ambassador paced. The Sithari Grand Researcher prayed quietly in the corner. Fessa stood beside Kor, her gold eyes fixed on the planet below. Finally, a small shuttle detached from one of the orbital stations. It began to approach them, unarmed, but moving with a precision that suggested its pilot was very skilled. The shuttle docked with their ship in perfect silence. Not a single bump, not a single jolt. The airlock opened. A woman stepped through. She was tall. Her hair was gray at the edges. She wore a simple dark suit with no insignia or decoration. She carried a small tablet and nothing else. Her name was Margaret Holloway. She had worked for the Earth Coordination Authority for 20 years. She did not greet them. She did not smile. She walked to the center of the bridge and stopped. Her eyes moved slowly over the group, studying each of them in turn. When her gaze reached Kor, she paused. He felt something cold move through him. He realized she knew exactly who he was. She had probably known he would be leading this mission. She had probably known for months. She spoke in a steady voice. "Why have you come?" Kor stepped forward. Every rehearsed apology fell out of his head. He spoke from somewhere deeper. "We came to apologize. We were wrong, deeply wrong. We want to find a way to repair what we broke." Margaret Holloway listened without expression. Her tablet hung at her side. She did not look down at it. Her eyes stayed on Kor's face. When he finished, she did not respond for a long moment. The bridge was completely silent. Even the hum of the engine seemed to fade. Then she asked a question. "What specifically are you apologizing for?" Kor started to answer with general words. "The trade vote, the insults, the unfair treatment." She held up her hand. "General apologies are the language of people who do not really mean them. I want specific apologies for specific actions. I want you to look me in the eye and name each thing you did." The confession took 3 hours. Kor went first. He named the trade vote. He named the Krell ambassador's speech mocking human emotions. He named the Sithari refusal to share medical research during the colony plague. He named his own approval of the order to redirect refugee ships. He named 20 other incidents from his career. His voice dropped to a whisper when he described signing the papers that closed safe harbors to families fleeing disasters. The Krell ambassador named his actions next. His voice trembled. He described laughing on the broadcast. He described calling humans primitive. He described dismissing his own son's warnings. The Sithari Grand Researcher named hers. She described withholding medical data. She described watching 3 human colonies struggle with illness and feeling nothing. She described her own cancer treatments, manufactured on a human world, and admitted she had never once thanked the people who made them. Fessa spoke. She named the dismissals, the interrupted speeches, the council votes that reduced Turin voting weight to 1/3, the educational programs promised and never delivered. The medical assistants requested 70 times and denied 70 times. Her daughter, rejected from the diplomatic academy 3 times despite scoring at the top of every entrance examination. The Brunari historian named the archives that had been sealed, the histories that had been rewritten, the witnesses who had been told to stop writing things down. One by one, every envoy in the room confessed. By the end, several of them were weeping. Margaret Holloway had not moved from her position. She had not interrupted. She had simply listened to every word. When they finished, she nodded slowly. "This is a beginning," she said. "Not a solution, a beginning. The first step toward repair is honest acknowledgement of harm. You have taken that step." She walked to the center of the bridge and brought up an image on her tablet. The map showed a network of small worlds spread across what the council called the Outer Veil. 43 nodes, each one labeled with a species name Kor recognized but had rarely thought about. The Turin Home World, the Brunari Archive World, the Oani Sanctuary, 40 worlds he had never visited, 43 species the council had dismissed as minor. 15 years, Holloway said, 43 young species, all of them ignored or mistreated by the council, all of them willing to work with humans on a different model. Kor stared at the map. The nodes were connected by lines that bypassed the council entirely: trade agreements, diplomatic frameworks, shared research. No single capital, no single ruling body, overlapping councils where every species had equal weight. Decisions required broad agreement. It was slower than the old council, less efficient, but it worked, and it was already larger than the council. The council had just never noticed because all of its members were species they had dismissed. Holloway said something then that struck Kor harder than anything he had heard before. For 15 years, humans had not been trying to compete with the council. They had been replacing it, not with force, not with threats, with patience and quiet construction. They had simply built something better while the council was not paying attention. The Krell envoy asked what they should do now. Holloway looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Humans have no interest in destroying the council. It can continue to exist if you want it to, but we will not be returning. Our place is in the network we helped create." She paused. What we will offer you is a choice. You can continue to operate the council as you always have. Maintain your protocols, your hierarchies, your trade systems. Humans will not interfere. You can rule your own space according to your own rules. Cling to your pride for as long as you are able. She let the silence stretch. Or you can begin the long, painful process of dismantling the council's old structures and building something new. Something based on the principles you see in this network. Equal voice, shared decision-making, respect for all species regardless of age or size. The SciFi Grand Researcher's voice was barely audible. If we choose the second path, then humans will consider eventually opening limited diplomatic and trade relations with the new system you build. Not a return to membership, not a partnership, just the beginning of conversation. How long will that take? Holloway smiled for the first time since arriving on the ship. It was not a warm smile. It was the small, sad smile of someone who had seen something difficult before. A generation, maybe two. Trust takes much longer to build than to destroy. We will not rush this process. We will not accept rushed solutions. The Krell ambassador protested. This is unreasonable. The Council has been the dominant power in the galaxy for 10,000 years. We deserve more respect than this. Holloway turned to him. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. For 10,000 years, the Council has ruled by treating younger species as inferior. For 10,000 years, it has used its power to extract, to dominate, and to dismiss. For 10,000 years, civilizations have risen and fallen at the edges of your control while older species grew rich on their suffering. She stepped closer. Humans have been patient students of history. We have read every record, every treaty, every report. We know what the Council did to the Brinari before the Brinari joined. We know what was done to the Turans. We know what was done to the SciFi themselves before the SciFi were powerful enough to resist. Her voice dropped. The Council has not earned the respect it is demanding. It has earned the response it is now receiving. The Krell envoy sat down heavily. He did not speak again for the rest of the meeting. Holloway turned back to the rest of the group. I have one more thing to share with you. It is important that you understand it. She waited until she had everyone's attention. Humanity is not unique. There is nothing special about us that allowed us to do what we did. We are not stronger than other species. We are not smarter. We are not braver. Kor leaned forward. The only thing that makes us different is that we remembered. When we joined the Council, we remembered what it felt like to be small and dismissed. And we refused to forget that feeling, even as we grew in power and influence. She looked around the bridge. Most species forget. They join the Council as small voices and grow into large ones. Once they are large, they begin to treat new small voices the way they themselves were once treated. The cycle continues. It has continued for 10,000 years. Her voice softened. Humans broke the cycle, not by being better than anyone else, just by remembering longer. This is the simplest gift I can give you. The knowledge that what we did is not impossible for you to do as well. You can remember. You can choose differently. You can break your own cycle. She turned to leave. Kor called after her. Is there anything we can do right now? One thing that would prove our intentions? She stopped. She turned back. Her eyes contained no anger, only deep tiredness. Yes, there is one thing. She walked back to the center of the bridge. Listen to your own small voices, the species you have ignored, the delegates you have dismissed, the Turans, the Brinari, the Oani, the lesser members you have never bothered to know. She looked directly at Kor. They have been telling you the truth for centuries. You have not been hearing them. If you want to change, start by listening to them. Not as a strategy, not as a tactic, as an honest practice of attention. She paused. This will be the test. If you can hear them, you can hear yourselves. If you cannot, you will never change. And humans will have no reason to ever speak with you again. She walked back to her shuttle. The airlock closed behind her. The shuttle detached. It returned to its orbital station. They were left alone on their small ship, drifting in human space, surrounded by structures they did not understand. The journey back to Council space took 11 days. Kor spent the first 3 days in his cabin. He wrote down everything Margaret Holloway had said, word for word, as best he could remember. He wrote down every small voice he had ignored over his career. He made a list of names, Turin delegates he had dismissed, Brunari ambassadors he had interrupted, Wani representatives whose concerns he had filed away without reading. The list grew very long. By the end of the third day, it filled 12 pages. On the fourth day, he went to find Fessa. She was in the ship's small library, reading a book in her own language. She looked up when he entered. Her gold eyes were calm. Kor sat down across from her. "I want to listen," he said. "I spent 20 years dismissing your people. I want to start hearing them now, even if it is too late to change what has already happened." She studied him for a long moment. Then she set down her book and began to speak. She told him about the Turin home world, a small planet, colder than most council worlds, thin atmosphere, difficult agriculture. Her people had developed slowly, building patient civilizations that valued cooperation over competition. They had been admitted to the council 200 years ago. They had spent every year since being treated as a minor curiosity. She told him about the council vote 30 years ago, the one that reduced Turin voting weight to 1/3 the value of larger species. She told him about the trade rules that had crushed their fragile economy, the educational programs that had been promised and never delivered, the medical assistance requested 70 times and denied 70 times. She told him about her daughter, the one who had wanted to become a council diplomat, the one who had been refused entry to the Voxian Diplomatic Academy 3 times despite scoring at the top of every entrance examination. The academy had given different reasons each time, all of them polite, all of them clearly false. Kor listened. He did not interrupt, he did not defend his people, he did not explain, he just listened. When she finished, he asked if she would tell him more. She asked if he really wanted to hear it. Yes. She talked for 6 more hours. She told him about her grandfather. He had served as a Turin ambassador to the council. He had died of a treatable illness because council medical staff had prioritized other patients ahead of him. She told him about her first marriage. It had ended because her husband, a researcher, had been denied access to council scientific facilities for 20 years. He had finally given up on his career, turned bitter, walked away. She told him about her hometown. Half its young people had migrated away. There were no opportunities under the current council system. The ones who stayed worked the same jobs their parents had worked. The ones who left never came back. Kor wrote down everything she said. By the end of their conversation, he had filled another notebook. His hand ached from writing. His eyes burned. But something inside him felt different. He felt like he had been carrying a heavy stone for many years. Only now had he realized it was there. That night he could not sleep. He went to the bridge and stood by the viewing window. The stars streamed past as the ship traveled at faster-than-light speed. The Krell envoy was already there. He looked tired and old, the loudest voice on the way to Earth. Now he looked smaller somehow. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then the Krell asked what Kor planned to do when they got back to the council. "I plan to do what Margaret Holloway suggested. Listen, spend the next year visiting every small species that has been ignored. Hear what they have to say. Report their concerns to my government. Do you think your government will listen?" Kor looked out at the stars. "I do not know, but I have to try." The Krell was quiet for a long moment. Then he told Kor something unexpected. His son, the one who had written the report, the one who had been demoted, the one he had called that night on the observation deck. "He answered," the Krell said. "He let me speak. I told him I was sorry. I told him he had been right. I told him I should have listened." His voice broke. He said he had been waiting for that call for 3 years. The Krell wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. Kor stood beside him in silence. They watched the stars together until the watch changed. The ship entered council space on the 11th day. The conquered spire looked different now. More lights were out. More systems had failed. The corridors were cold because the climate controls had broken down further. People walked through the hallways looking exhausted and frightened. Their eyes had a hollow quality Kor had never seen before. The speaker greeted them at the main docking port. He looked thinner than when they had left. His eyes were red. "The full council awaits your report," he said. Immediately, Kor nodded. The chamber was packed. Every delegate from every species was present. The galleries above were filled with citizens and journalists. This report would be broadcast to every member world of the council. Kor walked to the speaking platform. No notes. He had decided not to use any. He would speak from what he had learned, in his own words, without polish, without preparation. He began by describing what they had seen on the journey to Earth. The orbital structures, the new ships, the bustling activity of human civilization. "Humans are thriving without us," he said. "They have built things we do not understand, things we will not be able to replicate." He described their meeting with Margaret Holloway. He read out as accurately as he could the things she had said to them, the choice she had offered. "We can continue the council as it is, or we can begin the long work of dismantling its old structures and building something new." He paused. The chamber was absolutely silent. "Humans will not return. There will be no negotiation about that. They have moved on. The question is whether we will move on as well, in our own way, towards something better." He described what each envoy had agreed to do: return to their own government, present a single recommendation, equal voting weight for all member species, council decisions requiring broad agreement rather than simple majority votes that allow older species to dominate, resources currently flowing toward older species redistributed to support the development of younger and smaller members. He knew as he spoke that these recommendations would not be popular. Many delegates were already shifting in their seats. The Krell envoy beside him looked tense and uncertain. Kor finished his report. He stepped back. The Krell envoy stood up, walked to the platform, confirmed everything Kor had said, added that his own government had agreed to support the recommendations. The Krell ambassador in the chamber looked stunned. His government had overruled him without even consulting him. The Sithari Grand Researcher spoke next. She confirmed the report, announced that the Sithari government had voted in an emergency session to support full restructuring. She named specific reforms her people would champion. She apologized publicly for her own past behavior: the refusal to share medical research during the colony plague, the years of dismissive silence. One by one, every envoy on the mission stood and confirmed the report. Each announced that their government had agreed to support reform. The chamber grew quieter and quieter. When the last envoy sat down, the speaker rose. "The council faces a choice," he said. "We can begin the work of reform immediately, or we can continue to fight against change and watch our civilization slowly collapse over the coming years." He called for a vote. The vote took 2 hours. Every delegate from every species cast their ballot. The results came in slowly, displayed on the great screen above the chamber. Kor watched the numbers climb. 41 species voted yes. 12 voted no. The reforms passed, not by a single vote like the envoy mission had passed, by a clear majority. The younger species had voted unanimously in favor. The older species had not all changed their minds, but enough had. The council, as they had known it, ended that day. 2 years passed. The reforms moved slowly, painfully. The voting weight system was abolished entirely. Every species, large or small, ancient or recent, had the same vote. Decisions required broad agreement, not narrow majorities. Trade rules were rewritten to favor the development of weaker economies rather than the protection of stronger ones. The older species resisted at every step. Many of Kor's Voxian colleagues fought the changes openly. There were resignations, public arguments, bitter divisions. The Krell Empire split into 2 factions, one supporting reform, one opposing it. The reformers won, but only after years of internal struggle. The Sithari faced a similar crisis. Several smaller species nearly left the new system out of frustration with how slowly things were moving. But things did move. Kor traveled constantly during those 2 years. He visited 43 worlds across what they had once called the periphery. He sat in small meeting halls and listened to local leaders explain their concerns. He took notes. He asked questions. He tried very hard not to give advice unless it was asked for. He tried very hard to do what Margaret Holloway had suggested. He tried to listen. It was harder than he had expected. His instincts built up over 20 years kept pushing him to interrupt, to explain, to lead. He had to consciously stop himself many times each day. Some days he did better than others. There were times when he caught himself mid-sentence, talking over a small voice. He would apologize, ask the person to start again. Fessa became his closest friend during this period. They spoke almost every week, sometimes in person, sometimes over long-distance communication. She told him which species to visit next, which leaders to meet, which concerns were most urgent. She was patient with him when he made mistakes. She corrected him gently when he fell back into old habits. She introduced him to people he would never have met on his own. Through her, he met a Brunari historian named Tana who had spent her life documenting council injustices. He met a young leader of the Oani people, a species he had never heard of, whose population had been reduced to 7,000 by council policies during the last century. He met an elderly Korean poet who had written about her people's suffering for 60 years. Her work was translated into only one council language, read by almost no one outside her own world. Each conversation taught him something new, each one filled in a piece of a picture he had refused to see for most of his life. On the second anniversary of the human withdrawal, he received a message. It was sent through the Turin Neutral Diplomatic Service, the only channel that now connected them with humans. The message was short, an invitation. A small human delegation would be willing to attend a meeting on Turin neutral territory in 3 months, not a return to formal diplomatic relations. A single conversation, a measure of how things had progressed. Kor was named by unanimous vote of the new council as the lead representative for their side. He prepared for 3 months. He read every report on the reforms. He gathered testimony from species across the galaxy about how their lives had changed. He assembled a delegation that included representatives from 12 species. 6 of them had been considered minor or insignificant by the old council. Fessa was on the delegation. So was Tana, the Brunari historian. So was the young Oani leader. They traveled to the Turin neutral world together. The meeting was held in a simple hall on a quiet hillside surrounded by gardens. It was not grand. It was not formal. It was deliberately humble. The human delegation arrived on a small shuttle. Margaret Holloway stepped off. She was older now. Her hair was fully gray, but she walked with the same calm steadiness. She was accompanied by 2 younger humans, a man named Daniel Brooks, a woman named Caroline Webb. Holloway greeted Kor first. She did not smile, but her eyes were kinder than they had been on their previous meeting. "It is good to see you again," she said. Kor told her it was an honor to be received. They sat down together in the simple meeting hall. There were no speeches, no opening statements. Holloway simply asked them to tell her what had changed. Kor had prepared a long presentation. He set it aside. He asked Fessa to speak first. Fessa described the Turin experience. She spoke about how the new voting system had allowed her people to finally participate as equals. The new trade rules that had ended the economic harm her world had suffered for 200 years. The educational programs that were finally being delivered. The medical assistance that was finally arriving. The diplomatic respect that was finally being shown to her people. She talked for an hour. Holloway listened without interrupting. Tana spoke next. She described the historical record being rewritten with input from species who had been ignored, the new academic institutions being founded on younger worlds, the libraries being built, the histories being preserved. She talked about the apologies that had been issued by older species, specific apologies for specific acts of harm. She named some of the apologies she found most meaningful. The young Oani leader spoke after that. He spoke about the rebuilding of his people's population, the return of citizens who had fled to other worlds, the gradual recovery of their culture and language and confidence. He thanked the new council for finally providing the support his people had needed for 100 years. Each member of the delegation spoke in turn. Each described real changes in real lives, not promises, not plans, actual results. When the last speaker finished, Holloway asked Core if he had anything to add. He shook his head. Our delegation has said everything that needed to be said. The work is not finished. It will never be truly finished. But it is real. It is continuing. We are committed to it. Holloway turned to her two human companions. They spoke quietly together for several minutes. Then she turned back to them. The human delegation accepts your report as a sign of meaningful progress, she said. This is not a return to full diplomatic relations. That will still take many more years. It will require continued evidence of sustained change. She paused, but the channels of communication can now begin to open more widely. Limited trade agreements can be discussed. Cultural exchanges can be considered. Researchers from your worlds can begin applying to study at human institutions. Acceptance will be on a case-by-case basis. Her voice softened. Most importantly, humans now believe that what you have begun is real. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something Core had not expected. Humans have been watching you closely for 2 years. We have studied your reforms, your debates, your setbacks, your progress. We have seen the resignations, the resistance, the slow, painful work of changing minds and changing systems. She looked directly at Core. We have been impressed. We did not expect you to do as well as you have done. We expected the old structures to reassert themselves. We expected reform to fail or to become merely cosmetic. We were preparing for a much darker outcome. She smiled, the small, sad smile, the one Core had learned to recognize. But you surprised us. You did the work not perfectly but honestly and together. She held his gaze. The choice to listen made the difference. The choice to truly hear small voices. That was the foundation of everything else you have built. This is the simplest and most difficult thing any civilization can do. She thanked them. Core felt tears fill his eyes. He had not expected gratitude. He had not expected praise. He had only expected the chance to begin a conversation, to be told that they had done well, that they had impressed the humans, that they had given them reason for hope. It was more than he had imagined possible. I will be honest with you, he said. We did it for ourselves. We did it because it was the right thing to do. He paused, but your words 2 years ago were the seed. Without that meeting, without your honesty, without the choice you offered us, we would not have known where to begin. Holloway nodded. The credit belongs to you. The choice was yours. The work was yours. The change is yours, but I am glad to have helped, in my small way, by simply telling you the truth. The meeting ended after another hour of quieter conversation. They exchanged gifts, simple ones, books and small artworks from their worlds. They made plans to meet again in another 2 years. The human delegation returned to their shuttle and departed. As their ship disappeared into the sky, Core stood with Fessa on the hillside watching it go. She asked him how he felt. He thought about it for a long moment. He felt many things: relief, pride, more than anything, the strange peace that comes when a long burden begins to lift. Grateful, he said. I feel grateful. She nodded. Gratitude is a good place to begin the next chapter. They walked back down the hillside together. The garden around the meeting hall was full of flowers in bloom. The wind was soft and warm. The sky above them was clear and blue. Core has written this account, so others will remember what happened. He wants them to remember the panic in the council chambers when the humans severed all diplomacy, the fear, the chaos, the slow understanding of how much they had taken for granted, the 4,000 warnings they ignored before the door finally closed. But he also wants them to remember what came after, the choice to change, the choice to listen, the choice at last to do the difficult work of becoming a better civilization than the one they had been. The humans had not saved them. They had simply walked away and forced them to save themselves. In the end, that was the greatest gift they could have given. And they, despite all their pride and all their errors, had finally been wise enough to accept it. The galaxy is different now. Smaller in some ways. The vast unified council core once served is gone forever. But the fragments that remain and the new structures they have built among themselves are healthier than what came before. Voices that were never heard are now being listened to. Species that were forgotten are now being seen. The work continues every day, in every meeting, in every small choice to truly hear what someone is saying. Core is older now. His career is mostly behind him, but he still travels when he can. He still listens when invited. He still writes down what he learns. And every 2 years, when their delegation meets with the humans on the Turan neutral world, he brings new stories to share, new voices that have been heard, new harms that have been repaired, new small steps toward a better way of being. Margaret Holloway has retired now, but other humans come in her place. They listen as she did. They ask careful questions. They take notes. They return home to their own civilization, which continues to grow in ways they still do not fully understand. They do not need to understand them anymore. They are too busy understanding themselves. That is enough. That is in fact more than Core once believed was possible. The day the humans severed all diplomacy was the worst day of his life. It was also, though he could not have known it at the time, the day his life truly began. He will be grateful for it until the day he dies. The wind moved through the garden. Flowers bent and straightened. Somewhere behind them a door opened and closed. Footsteps crossed gravel. A voice called out. Another answered. Fessa was already walking toward the meeting hall. Core watched her go, her small figure against the green hillside, her gold eyes catching the light. He turned back to the sky. The human shuttle was gone.